Most men hear one phrase more than any other: be a lion, and they think they understand it. Be dominant, be strong, be someone to be feared. But what nobody tells you is this: in Western philosophy, there are two different animals. One belongs to Machiavelli, the fox. The other belongs to Nietzsche, the lion, and they are not the same animal. They do not serve the same purpose. They do not fight on the same battlefield. And if you don't understand them, if you skip one while becoming the other, you will spend your entire life watching power instead of holding it. Most men do exactly that. Most men were never taught this distinction, not because this knowledge had never been heard before, because it was never meant to be heard. Something that was already inside you was kept from you, quietly, systematically, through things presented to you as truth, things that served someone else's interests. This knowledge was trained out of you. You were taught to comply, told to soften your instincts, while they quietly grew strong and became the authority. Eventually, you became predictable, manageable, safe. You learned that being gentle is emotional intelligence. You learned that holding yourself back is virtue. You learned that the sharpness you once carried was something to apologize for. And at some point, you stopped learning which animal you were supposed to be. You just tried to look like one. This video is about recovering that sense you lost, not the performance of power, the architecture of power. By the end of this video, you will understand why most dominant behavior is hollow, why some men can silence a room without raising their voice, and what the correct sequence of transformation actually looks like. But if you came here to learn techniques for displaying power you don't possess, you will never find what you're looking for here. What I'm going to say here will not resemble a TED Talk. When you walk into a room, watch your own movements. Whatever that reaction is, that is your starting point. Let's begin. Watch what most men do when they enter a room. They begin to analyze, immediately, automatically, who already has power here, whose status is higher, where the center of gravity is, and then, without realizing it, they adjust themselves accordingly. If the room is loud, they become a little louder. If the room is quiet, they become a little quieter. They move slightly closer to whoever seems most important. These aren't bad people. They're not even aware of what they're doing. They're just like planets, orbiting in a gravitational field. No harm in them. They simply revolve around the dominant side, and the room knows this. Now watch the other man. He enters the same room. He doesn't search for the center. He doesn't calibrate his energy to the environment. He walks at his own pace. He finds his place, and he waits quietly, effortlessly, and within 2 minutes the room reorganizes itself around him. No entrance performance, no announcement, no staged authority. Just wait. This is not a technique. This is the result of an architecture built in the correct sequence, and that is exactly what this video is about. There was a time when every man knew something by instinct, something innate, that the world has teeth, that survival required the capacity for real, decisive use of force, not always used, but necessary to possess. Machiavelli understood this not as an armchair philosopher, but as a diplomat watching the real-time collapse of governments. He saw men rise and fall, not because of virtue, because of their capacity to be perceived as dangerous. The moment they were seen as a threat to someone else's authority, he observed what centuries of sterile ethical discourse had tried to conceal. Power flows toward those who possess the capacity to use it. A genuinely heavy, undeniable man derives his weight not from display, but from the capacity he carries. And what most people skip when quoting Machiavelli is this: he was not praising cruelty. He was throwing truth in their faces. The cruel man is actually weak. He punishes because he cannot control. His violence is cowardice wearing a mask, but the dangerous man needs no such masks. Calm, still, composed, and precisely because of that stillness, everyone around him feels his capacity. There is an old Italian concept, terribilità. It means some people change the weight of a room simply by being present. It was used to describe Michelangelo, not his sculptures, his presence. his capacity to walk into a room and alter its atmosphere without speaking, without threatening, without performing anything, simply by existing. Such was the aura of his concentrated capacity that even popes adjusted their behavior around him. This quality is not innate, it is built, and it was taken from you, not through violence, not explicitly. Schools taught you to cooperate, to retreat. The competitive instinct that allowed your ancestors to survive was removed from you under the label of toxicity. You learned to frame avoiding conflict as maturity, when most of the time it was cowardice given a new name. By the time you reached adulthood, the message had already settled. Being dangerous is bad. Being safe is good. Power is suspect. Compliance is virtue, and this is where most men get lost. You began to believe that protecting your own domain is aggression, that sharp boundaries are toxic, that carrying authority without apology is something to be managed, not something owed. But ask yourself, when your first instinct is to appease, who wins? Not you. The softening of the human spirit was not an accident. It is a strategy. A population of harmless individuals is easily governed, easily sold to, easily controlled. Dangerous people ask questions. They resist. They cannot be coerced into consensus. That is why the world made danger taboo, not violence. Violence is messy, prosecutable, inefficient, but danger, the capacity to use force when provoked, that was the greatest threat to them. It had to go, and for most men, it went.
Here is the line most men have not read carefully. Machiavelli says, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, therefore one must also be a fox." But this does not show that the lion is weak. It says, "The lion who relies on force alone is blind. Without perception, power is fragile. A man who only knows how to use force can always be defeated by someone who knows how to be patient." This is Machiavelli's first warning.
Raw power is necessary but not sufficient. That is why the prince must be both lion and fox. The lion provides what the fox cannot, the capacity to produce real consequences, the power of deterrence. But a lion without a fox is brute force until it walks into a trap it couldn't see, and most men don't even realize when this happens. Now look at what passes for dominant behavior in the modern world. Chest out, voice loud, energy in performance mode. The classic posture of a man who has read about the fox but has not understood Machiavelli's warning. That is the trap, and most men genuinely try to display in themselves only what they've seen, without developing the fox's awareness, without building the stillness that makes power credible. And the room notices the absence immediately, not consciously, subconsciously. 10,000 years of evolution have programmed our nervous systems to read other people in milliseconds. It feels the difference between someone simulating calm and someone who is genuinely calm. The man overcompensating with aggression is easy to read. Every excess reveals insecurity. Every loud moment shows that something underneath hasn't settled. He's trying to convince you and himself. But the calm man, the one who carries his capacity without announcing it, the man who does not need the room's approval, he becomes a question mark, and question marks disturb people who need to categorize you. Machiavelli wrote, "Men generally judge more with their eyes than with their hands. Everyone can see you, but very few will truly touch you. Image creates reality. If people perceive you as dangerous, then even if you never use it, you are functionally dangerous. Perception alone changes what people dare to attempt. But, and this is the point Machiavelli's lion cannot explain, where does this perception come from? Not from technique, not from posture, voice, or eye contact. These matter, but they are not the source. The source is interior, something Machiavelli could observe but could not fully explain. For that we need Nietzsche. Nietzsche was not concerned with courts or princes. He was concerned with the human soul, with what becomes of the soul under pressure. What happens when a person has been conditioned for so long that they can no longer distinguish between their own values and the values others have planted inside them? In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche describes three transformations of the spirit: the camel, the lion, and the child. And his lion, the one he cares about most, is not about dominating rooms or signaling status. Nietzsche's lion has one sacred task: to say no, not to enemies, to chains, to obligations, to the voice inside that says you must, to the voice planted within by parents, institutions, social circles. Nietzsche's lion roars, "I will not," and this roar is interior. It is not performed for an audience. It is the moment a person breaks free from the need for external permission, the moment he no longer needs permission to exist on his own terms. The lion does not dominate rooms, it shatters cages, and most men skip this stage entirely because Nietzsche's transformation does not look dramatic from the outside. There is no room to impress, no performance. There is only a man, alone, facing the gap between what he actually believes and what he has been told to believe. Most men cannot bear this confrontation, and instead they reach for Machiavelli's fox, external signals without internal foundation, and the room immediately feels what is missing. This is where the confusion lives. Men see the lion and the fox. They hear the language of dominance, presence, commanding a room, and they reach directly for Machiavelli's fox: power, display, intimidation. Without understanding Nietzsche's teachings, they try to imitate power while still internally dependent, while still seeking approval, while still reactive to perception, while still needing the room. And this creates a gap in the nervous system that everyone notices. Performance dominance. It looks sharp on the surface, but it leaks. You feel the excess effort in calibrated eye contact, in the controlled voice, in the laugh that comes too fast. Performance dominance is the most common male display in the modern world, and to someone who has done the real work, it is completely transparent. A genuinely free man, someone who has completed Nietzsche's transformation, does not need to perform anything. His stillness is not technique. His presence is not strategy. These are simply the natural state of a person who no longer asks the room who he is. And when you encounter such a person, your nervous system files them away before they've even spoken, not as a threat, as a center of gravity. And that center of gravity automatically changes the shape of every interaction. This is what most men try to imitate in the wrong order. If you place both philosophers side by side, and understand what each one is actually pointing at, you can genuinely build the architecture. First, Nietzsche's lion, reaching internal clarity. The day you genuinely no longer need permission, not because you heard it from someone else, but because you noticed it yourself. Because you now understand the hunger for approval from within yourself, the values you never questioned, instilled in you since birth. The conditional version of yourself that emerges when approval is threatened, the side that bends, shrinks, when social pressure becomes strong enough. Without facing that side and breaking through it, nothing can be built on solid ground. Second, the fox's awareness. You develop the ability to map a room: who truly carries power, who is merely imitating power, what dynamics lie beneath the surface conversation, where the traps are. If you act before doing this, you are powerful but blind. You will easily be defeated by someone patient. Only after this, Machiavelli's lion. Controlled power, measured pressure, the willingness to make consequences inevitable when the situation demands it. Not imitation, not reaction, chosen, deliberate, final. Most men do this entirely backwards. They start with the fox, power without freedom, display without perception, presence without depth, and every room they enter feels the instability beneath the performance. The temperature of the room doesn't change, or it changes in the wrong way. Being unpredictable and being powerful are not the same thing. One makes people uneasy, the other makes people straighten up. Let me tell you what happens when you stay in the wrong sequence. Nothing dramatic occurs, and that is precisely the tragedy. There is no single great catastrophe you can point to, just the slow drip of water wearing away at stone, small moments accumulating across years, moments where you didn't stand your ground when you should have, where you imitated the lion and still walked into the fox's trap. Every concession looks small, survivable, not worth the conflict. I'll fix it later, but year by year, the performance exhausts you. Because carrying a shape that isn't yours requires energy. Every room demands active effort, whereas if it were real, it would require no effort at all. And the room always felt the difference. It always knew. Machiavelli wrote, "You cannot avoid war. It can only be postponed to someone else's advantage." Every dynamic you haven't mastered governs you. Every trap you can't see you step into. The man who skips the fox's training doesn't escape the room. He just wanders through it blind. One day he makes a move, decisive, like a lion, and he walks directly into a trap he could have seen coming. That is the cost, not failure, preventable failure. Let's speak concretely, because this sequence, fox, then lion, is not merely philosophy, it is a practical architecture. The body. Your physicality communicates before you speak, but the goal is not to imitate physicality, it is to inhabit it. There is a difference between someone who holds their posture and someone who moves without apology. The man who has understood Nietzsche doesn't think about his posture. He doesn't shrink because there is nothing to apologize for. He doesn't rush because there is no more important place than where he is. He doesn't fidget because his body is not managing anxiety. He is simply there. Notice where you automatically give up space. In the elevator, in the meeting room. When someone of slightly higher status enters, stop, not aggressively, calmly. Just stop giving up space you haven't decided to give. These micro shifts accumulate. They change not how others perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. The voice, a dangerous voice, is not loud. It is controlled. Filler words are verbal apologies. They signal real-time uncertainty. Remove them. Speak as though every sentence carries a cost, because it does. Pause before responding, not from anxiety. Deliberately, let the person across from you wait in the weight of you thinking. That pause says what words cannot. I am not reactive. You cannot rush me. The eyes. Most people fail here. The soft person breaks eye contact under pressure. The genuinely dangerous person simply stays, not aggressively, just there without discomfort, as if this moment is not something to be managed. When your eyes say, "I am not afraid of this moment," the moment changes. The boundary. Dangerous people have limits, and they are known without being announced. They don't explain their lines, they show them. When someone crosses that line, they don't argue, they don't justify, they don't negotiate, they act quietly. Finally, a single sentence, delivered like stating a physical fact. That will not happen again. Not a threat, a fact. And even if the other person doesn't fully understand it, they know this is true. This is the fox's architecture, protecting the lion. Awareness removes the need for force. Perception makes display unnecessary. Rooms do not respond to performance. Rooms respond to regulation, to your level of need, to your capacity to withstand pressure, to the gap between your presentation and the reality beneath it. Human nervous systems are extraordinarily sensitive to this, not consciously, but at the level of micro-expressions, posture, vocal tone, timing. We read each other at a resolution that the conscious mind cannot process.
This is why you cannot fake danger. You can only cultivate it. The man performing as a lion, the man copying external signals without doing the internal work, is completely legible to someone who has done the real work. Every excess reveals itself. Every over-control shows. The points at which he will collapse under pressure are readable from how he manages minor pressure. The room perceives regulation, and regulation is not performance. It is the result of a genuinely built internal architecture, a nervous system that has faced its own darkness, a psychology that has broken the chain of approval, awareness sharpened through the patient work of the fox. When three layers converge, Nietzsche's rupture, the fox's perception, the lion's power, the result is not something you produce in the morning. It is who you are, and rooms know this before you speak. In nature, predators are not cruel. They are simply awake. Their attention is complete. Their movements are purposeful. Every motion is measured against intent. Prey animals live differently. Constant low-level alarm. Reactive, searching for threats while unable to become one. Prey reacts. Predators decide. Modern society turned everyone into prey, not through violence, through comfort, through conditioning. Every notification, every approval signal, you respond to every cycle of outrage, but you lost the capacity to carry a predator's mind. The mind that creates condition, the mind that does not react, the mind that people instinctively do not want to challenge. Predators rarely use violence. They don't need to. Their capacity is so apparent that most conflict never materializes. The fox doesn't fight every animal it encounters. Even its presence defines what is possible. This is what the completed sequence produces. Not a lion performing, not a fox hiding, a fully aligned predator, creating conditions, seeing what others cannot, and using force when it is required, without hesitation, without apology, without excess. People stop testing you, not because you threaten them, because they sense it would be pointless. Negotiations change. You no longer feel the need to prove. You state your position calmly. If it isn't accepted, you leave. Relationships change. You attract people who respect sharpness, not those who profit from its absence. Your internal experience changes. Am I enough? Does the room accept me? That low-level anxiety goes quiet because the question ceases to be a question. It becomes a fact. And facts are not managed. In martial arts, there is a concept, zanshin, a relaxed alertness that persists even after the technique is finished. Mind open, body ready, no gaps in awareness. This is the posture of the man who has built correctly, not tension. Tension depletes readiness, a soft attention. Most people live in two states, numbed comfort or reactive anxiety, sleep or panic. The man who has done this work lives in a third state, present, calm, at full capacity. And from this state, he can be kind without being weak. He can be patient without being passive. He can be generous without being exploitable. Because his kindness is a choice, and everyone knows it. There is another choice available, and this man has consciously selected this one. The only kindness the world truly respects is this. Machiavelli's fox makes you dangerous to others. Nietzsche's lion makes you free from yourself. The fox keeps you alive long enough to use both. If you mix up the sequence, if you skip the internal rupture, skip the perception, and go directly to display, you will spend your life performing. But if you build in the correct sequence, the room adjusts before you speak, not because you learn to look powerful, because you became something the room cannot categorize. The moment you walk into a room and perform nothing, and yet the temperature still changes, that is the result of two philosophers correctly understood, Machiavelli's fox and Nietzsche's lion. They are not the same animal, but they are different stages of the same man. The question is not whether you have the capacity, you do. The question is, are you willing to do the work in the correct sequence? And now that you've seen the sequence,
You can no longer pretend you haven't. What will you do? Most people won't even watch this far. But if you did, what are you waiting for to take action? Start now. Hit the subscribe button below and like for more content like this. Most people won't do it anyway. That's exactly how the system works. Mindferal.